Hello, and a very warm welcome to all of you joining the live stream. We're streaming live on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today. Please, if you're there, please do give me a thumbs up or something to make it clear that you can hear everything fine. And please let me know in the comments where you're from and who you are. That will be a great help to me. So once again, a very warm welcome. Please confirm to me that you can hear everything fine. And then we'll set off and dig down into this exciting project that we're going to look at together. All right, well, as we go, please do let me know if you have any questions or in comments. Please do engage. If you make some comments, they on this screen will appear there. But I would like to invite you to put in your questions and comments. Hello, Molly. Great pleasure to see you here. I'm joining from Austin, Texas. Fantastic. Hope everything's well with you there. What we will do, if you have questions or comments, please do put them into the chat. Seng Peng, also a warm welcome to you, also from the US. Great to see you here today. If you have any questions or comments, please do feel free to let me know via the comments. I'll do my best to address them. This session is going to take about 45 minutes, so I may not have time to address everything, but will respond to your comments in writing if I don't have time to address them in the live session. So I'll go into LinkedIn or YouTube and type in the comments responses to the comments that you make. At the end of this live session, I'll give you a link to a very brief evaluation form. I'd really love to get your feedback and I'll listen to it. I'll take it into account. Last time, one of the respondents to the evaluation form was to ask me to give more references for the projects and the references for the documents that I referred to and such like, so that you could follow things up yourself. And so I'm going to do that as we go. I'll use some QR codes which you can scan with your phone. So if you are not using your phone for this call, you can get the QR code reader ready, perhaps just your camera, so that we can so that you can jump to those documents. I'll also put the links for those in the comments after the session so that you can access it there. So great, we've got Nicholas, welcome. Great to see you here. It's always lovely to see CFAN advisors and to see Alex, great to see you here. Kisolel, fantastic, from PNG, that's fantastic, working on climate projects, community development in rural areas. Wonderful. Ksenia, it's been a long time since we were in touch. It's really wonderful to see you here. And Natala, welcome again, another CFAN member. Fantastic to see all of you here. Right, so today we're going to discuss one of the projects that was approved at the most recent board meeting of the GCF. It's already last year, it's board meeting number 40, which was held in Sondo in Korea in October 2024. The next board meeting is going to happen really soon, in just over 5 weeks from now, again in Korea, in February. The project that we're looking at is SAP number 45. It's called Scaling Up Climate Resilience Solutions for Burundian Smallholders. It was submitted by the One Acre Fund in May 2024, after a concept note was submitted in January of 2024. So that's approval in 9 months or so from the concept note submission and 6 months after the first submission of the SAP proposal, which is pretty quick for those of you who have got experience working with GCF projects, and that's a quick timeline. Right, so rather than introducing the project myself, I've extracted a couple of minutes from the video of the board meeting where Henry Gonzalez, the Chief Investment Officer of the fund, introduces it. After we hear that introduction, I'll discuss, amongst other things, the PSAA accreditation, go into a little bit of detail about that because this is the first PSAA project. I'm going to talk about their revolving fund approach, and we'll dig into the theory of change as well, look at the budget, looking at the implementation arrangements and such like. So let's listen first to Henry Gonzalez from
Burundian smallholders face multiple barriers contributing to climate vulnerability and food insecurity. Despite the country's dependence on rain-fed agriculture, yields remain low, leading to widespread hunger and malnutrition, particularly among ultra-poor smallholders. Multiple climate hazards are already eroding gains in productivity and disrupting livelihoods in a context of very low adaptive capacity. To address these challenges, the project aims to tackle Burundi's vulnerabilities to climate change and to enhance the adaptive capacity of farmers by scaling up a proven model that supports smallholders through input funding, delivery, trainings, and agroforestry for livelihood diversification. The multi-year target support will enable farmers to graduate from subsistence agriculture while diversifying their agricultural activities and better accessing markets. This cross-cutting project will directly support 1.5 million beneficiaries through an integrated package of climate-smart agricultural inputs, advisory services, and agroforestry support, while removing 1.99 million tons of CO2 equivalent. These activities will contribute to achieving USP targets 4, food systems, and target 5, ecosystems. This project is the first proposal under the Project-Specific Assessment Approach, PSAA, and it demonstrates how PSAA modality can accelerate access to GCF resources, reduce transaction costs for implementing innovative climate projects, and expand partnerships with new entities. While PSAA applicants are not institutionally accredited, therefore we do not use direct taxes or international, this specific project has had the endorsement of the NDA through its One Acre Fund Burundi office. Thank you, Co-Chair, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So, as you saw there, this project is the first PSAA project, and that makes it unique. It's the first project approved by the GCF board under the PSAA. Well, PSAA stands for Project-Specific Assessment Approach, which is a pilot alternative accreditation approach that was approved by the GCF board at board meeting number 31 in March 2022. And it became active in April 2023. So the pilot will run for 3 years. So that's quite important, that start date, April 2023, and it will end in March 2026. All expectations are that a modality like this will continue well after that period, but this pilot is that 3-year period. GCF says that it expects to receive about 10 projects per year during the pilot phase. But as you can see, the first project was approved more than a year after the modality became active. So not exactly sure how that will pan out. I'm putting a QR code up on the top left of your screen. You can use this if you would like to jump to find out more about the modality. These are GCF PSAA resources. You can find out more about the approach that GCF use, the questionnaires that they have available and such like. It's a website, part of their website dedicated to the PSAA. If you'd rather not follow that link right now, as I mentioned, I'll post it along with other links in the comments. Since the PSAA is so new, this being the very first project approved under this modality, I'll spend a couple of minutes to introduce the mechanism. Then we'll dive into the specifics of the approval for this project, scaling up climate resilient solutions for Burundian smallholders. So, just going to share my slides and then we'll dig into the details of this. So, What I've got here is the project proposal that went in to be submitted to the GCF. I'm going to just scale it up so that you can see it. This is on page 37 of that document. It's the Secretariat's assessment of the PSAA applicant and the assessment of the SAP for number 45. So we're going to dig into that, but let me show you how this differs from a normal project. Just turn off that QR code so that you can see it more easily. So there are two modalities for accreditation, as you know. One is what they call institutional accreditation, which you can see over here. It follows an accreditation process. It's a very long accreditation process here. In fact, it takes multiple years for organizations around the world, often takes many years to get accredited. And there's discussion at the board right now to revamp the whole accreditation process. So there's big changes that will take place here. Then there's the funding proposal step. So an organization gets approved, then there's a funding proposal, and then project implementation. With the project-specific assessment approach, there is a review of both the project and the accredited entity and their capacity to develop it at the same time. The same organizations are involved, the Secretariat and the ITAP, the Independent Technical Advisory Panel. They're both involved in this. But there is a little bit of a subtle difference from how it would normally go. What I want to show in this picture, it also comes from that link, the PSAA resources link, and the policy that GCF follows, is that the Secretariat make a review of both the funding proposal and of the PSAA application itself. But the Technical Advisory Panel, you'll be maybe happy to know, focuses in on the funding proposal itself, not on the accreditation side of this. All right, we're going to dig into this project in a moment, but let's have a quick look at the Secretariat assessment and what we can see from that. So here it is. The document that I'm looking at is actually this one. It comes from, it's public document that comes from the board documents that are discussed by the board. These are only public ones. I don't have any access to anything that is restricted. So it's everything that you can find yourself. And I've just put a QR code for that up on the top left of the screen. So this is the overall assessment of the application. It's nice, simple table that gives you a quick insight into it. First of all, overall capacity side of the thing. So you can see here there is a comment that it was assessed as high. That is critically important here. We don't know for sure, but I suspect overall capacity high will have to be the assessment for a GCF to take forward a project through PSAA. And have a look at what they are assessing there. Firstly, they state that the applicant has a well-developed financial management system, a well-functioning control framework, including risk management, robust systems and policies in place, and they are obviously very concerned about money laundering, financing of terrorism, and other prohibited practices. So this is showing that the accredited entity has got robust mechanisms to make sure that this doesn't happen. Fraud, corruption, and they assess that it has sufficient scope to manage the environmental and social aspects and gender risks associated with the project. So they assess this as high, and that you can see as an endorsement of this accredited entity, this to be accredited entity. There are fiduciary functions that have been approved by the GCF. One is the basic fiduciary standards, and one is the specialized fiduciary standard for project management. There are no other fiduciary standards that are covered here, fiduciary functions. I wonder if someone there, if you'd like to put in a comment, would hazard a guess, or perhaps you've seen a presentation that I made a number of months ago, soon after the board meeting, in which I mentioned this. What is particularly noticeable about these two fiduciary functions? Why is it quite a notable thing that there are just these two? I'd love it if you put something in the comments, having a guess or from your knowledge of the project. Okay, and you can see that they have also assessed this organization as able to implement category C. Within the project, it goes on to give details of the capacity, as a summary of the capacity assessment that was made. So you can see here, for me, what is notable is they're talking about, they are applying for 25 million grant, but the 1 Acre Fund has an average annual operating budget of 200 million. Right, so this is giving an indication that the size of the project is appropriate for the sort of scale of the organization. If this organization is working with an operating budget of 200 million, then a grant from GCF of 25 million is within the scope of what they would be able to cope with, and that gives security and reassurance to the GCF that this can be funded. They note that the operating expenses in Burundi specifically, because 1 Acre doesn't only work in the 1 Acre Fund doesn't only work in Burundi, but they are on average for the past 3 years 15.5 million funding. All right. So you can see this is an overview of the application. They talk about the category C that comes from the concept note that was submitted in January of 2024, category C, but then they say as well that the ENS review team at GCF confirmed their category C on the basis of the funding proposal. All right, and a little bit very briefly on methodology. I'll leave it to you to dig into this detail, but there are essentially two steps. First is the completeness check of the documentation that has been submitted. They may request additional things. And then step 2 consists of a first assessment of it, and then continue with a final assessment and review of the risks once the funding proposal is received. So firstly, it's based on the concept note, and then it goes on to the funding proposal. So that process of assessment, once they're happy with the GCF Secretariat is happy with the concept note, appears to start straight away, and they review it. And there is what they call an ERT, which stands for an external review team, that was hired to do this comprehensive review of all the submitted documents and have interviews and do reference checks as well. You can see they did a reference check with the Dutch DEGIS, Directorate General for International Cooperation. All right. And not to go into this in too much detail, but there are a number of factors that are checked, worth knowing. Obviously, the contribution to the GCF mandate. Does this fit in with what GCF is trying to do? Does the organization fit in with what they're trying to achieve? Track record of similar projects. For me, I think it's really notable that they are currently serving 290,000 smallholder farmers in 7 provinces of Burundi. So they've got track record. They really know what they're doing there. And this is reaching, I'm not sure exactly where it says, but it's reaching about 1.5 million beneficiaries. And it's notable that the project that GCF approves targets about 1.5 million beneficiaries as well, direct beneficiaries. So there's something quite aligned. The project fits in with what you would expect 1 Acre Fund to be able to do. All right. There's about legal status, and then the fiduciary standards. And I'm looking at the comments. No one has yet put in any particular comment of why you think it's notable that there are only two types: administrative functions. You will see down here, just paging through the document, they're assessing the ability, and essentially here the ERT, this external review team, assesses that the One Acre Fund has demonstrated to have sufficient general management and administrative capacity to manage the funds. So if you're thinking of putting together a PSAA project, ensure that that is one of the elements. You want an organization that for which these funds are not substantially different from what they already have as experience. Yeah, something that is sort of building on what they're already doing, where they have a track record, they are known in the country, they've got a good ability to do what needs to be done. Just jumping a little bit further down here, here's the specialized standards that they assess. Firstly, project management, which of course you can understand. They need to manage this overall project, so they assess that this organization has a track record of management and it's the expected level. And then grant award or funding allocation. They have not applied for grant award. Note that. Still no one answered my question in the comments, but we'll get to that. And the One Acre Fund did not apply for accreditation for on-lending or blending. They then assess the environmental social risks, but I'm not going to go into detail on that. Excuse me if it's blurring when I scroll through. I just want to mention the gender policy because this gets raised at the board meeting. In fact, One Acre Fund put forward a very strong, they've got a gender at One Acre Fund, a memo, and they've got a gender measurement strategy, but they don't have an overall gender policy. It says there is no standalone gender policy. And in fact, that was raised by an observer to the board. But also, I think worth mentioning that the ERT recommends that they develop and take and have a gender policy as an organization. And you see that reflected also in the ITAP comments and such like. So this was one of the points that were raised, and the accredited entity agreed to that, to develop that, along with a number of other factors. All right, so let's jump back. I'm not seeing any additional questions or comments, but I'm going to jump back and have a look at what the project actually is. We've talked enough about the assessment of the One Acre Fund. We've seen it's a big organization that is able to cope with this. It's got the mechanisms, it's got its experience in Burundi and such. But what actually are they going to do? And I took this from the feasibility study of the project. So this comes straight copy pasted from one of the documents that went to the board. And here we can see, in a nutshell, the overall idea of what this project is doing. So they're going to establish a GCF project account in the United States. Into that, obviously, GCF is going to put all of the money for this project, perhaps in tranches, we don't have that detail, for both what they call working capital and operational costs. And co-financiers, there is about $10 million of co-financing that is contributed to the project, is also going to be contributed into the same fund. Then One Acre Fund will transfer to Burundi funds, and at that time the US dollars turn into the Burundian francs. I'm not sure what the symbol is for Burundian franc, my apologies. So the funds get converted into local currency, as I understand it, into a general account, and the activities start. So they're going to do two different things with it. One is what they have called here is the GCF Working Capital Revolving Fund, which will be about 60% of the GCF projects, and another one, about 40%, of course, goes into operational activities. Now, one of the comments from the board members, some board members, was they're shocked that the operational activities are so large. I think it's worth having a careful look at what makes it seem large and also what they define as operational activities. So I'll give some detail about that. But in fact, it's all the funds from GCF that are spent on training, on monitoring and evaluation, on whatever it is, to facilitate, including investments in seedlings for trees and logistics and everything like that, is part of this operational thing. Now, it says a fund, a revolving fund, working capital revolving fund. Essentially, a mechanism will happen, which we'll see on the next slide. No, on the slide after next. Actually, let me jump straight to it here. So this is one of the components of the project. In fact, some of the activities of the project. I'm just going to turn off these QR codes. Great to see people still introducing themselves. It's fantastic to see you here. So I'm going to hide this, and I think I can also turn off the logo here. Okay, so here's the project, here's the plan, how it goes. So first activities relate to a farmer enrollment. This is all part of component 1, but it's a fascinating part. Farmers program enrollment. So they do a little bit of training or awareness raising amongst farmers. They do it twice a year, season A and season B. They then, from the farmers, collect orders. What would they like to buy? What would the farmers like to purchase? And they then consolidate all this, and 1AF, this is the 1 acre fund, buys the products, the seed and the fertilizers. So they get them and they store them in large storage and distribute it gradually. So they have suppliers, local suppliers, that deliver these products, the seed and the fertilizers, to the farmers that ordered them. So they have a delivery mechanism that takes it out into the field. Key here is that 1AF buys the products. And let me double check my chat here, but as far as I know, no one answered the question of why is it notable here, and that this accreditation, project-specific accreditation, shall we call it, this was covering only basic fiduciary standards of project management. How is this functioning? And I guess it's here is that 1AF buys the products and the seed and the fertilizer. They deliver it, so it goes, so the suppliers deliver it to 1AF. I got that slightly wrong. 1AF delivers this through local suppliers to the farmers. The farmer receives it and signs a contract. The farmers reimburse the value to 1AF at the end of the season or through the season. So as they grow crops and they have the funds that are available from selling that, from taking that to market, they've then got the money to be able to reimburse 1AF. And their experience is that they have actually 99% of collected funds come back to 1AF during this period. So you can see for season A, it's after the end of this, it's the next season once they've already got the crops. And they write off a certain amount. So this is a sinking fund. It gradually gets less and less in the fund unless it's topped up by international donors. And there is a certificate for farmers in each group. So once there have been 6 seasons, once 6 seasons have been successfully navigated, the particular farmer has repaid 1AF 6 times through 6 seasons over 3 years. They will issue a certificate to that farmer, which is a sort of certificate of good standing, that this is a reliable farmer, so it's worth lending to it. And the idea here is that this starts to open the doors to allow microfinance institutions to to lend to these farmers. Okay, so here's the budget. Almost everything goes into this component that I just showed. 29.6 is the total cost, with 21.1 coming from the GCF. This little bit that I've shown you around enhanced ability for finance, I didn't mean to zoom in, but it's not necessarily a problem. So that the farmers here have enhanced ability to access financial services, so a smaller amount of the funds. Let me try and work out how, there we go, to zoom out again. So there's a very small amount of the funds over this 5-year project that go into that. There is training, capacity building around climate smart practices, which get 1.1 million from the GCF. And then there is an agroforestry component, which is around agroforestry to stabilize hills, as well as fruit trees to support either additional income for farmers or improved, reduced soil erosion and such like. Interesting structure. But I just wanted to just double down on that once again. This organization was not assessed or accredited for giving loans, but throughout the documentation they talk about the revolving fund. So it's quite an interesting mechanism, and I think it works, and it works for GCF. Why I emphasize this is we've been working on a number of projects where GCF have said, well, sorry, that doesn't fit in with an accreditation that allows only basic the fiduciary standards for project management. So how do you actually do that? So it's worth noting that, in fact, when the accredited entity is purchasing and then giving a gift, as it were, which gets then repaid, GCF's okay with that, it seems. I don't know whether that's a model that we can use more extensively, but it's certainly something to discuss with the GCF if you have a project that has that type of need. All right. Again, from the feasibility study, they're not saying it's not a revolving fund. They're not using difficult words for it. Essentially, that's how it works. And I said it's a sinking fund, this working capital here. That means there's a need for periodic top-up of it. And that would come presumably from additional donors. All right. And where am I? I found this table in the feasibility study quite interesting. When they have worked, when 1AF has worked with their farmers for 2 seasons, it comes from, this data is from Burundi. It's taken an average of assets and newly enrolled members. You can see that there has been a growth. It shows 37%. We don't know if it's a growth, in fact, but we can see that there is a growth of the assets within the farm from here to here. It would have been good to see before and after type of figures. And I'm not 100% sure whether that is what they're showing here, that newly enrolled and then they go through 2 seasons and their assets have improved. And any of you that have been working in that area of, as people's assets improve, they're able to make decisions themselves in terms of where to invest, and they become more resilient to climate change and other shocks that they experience. So an interesting model there, which, yeah, I like it. Interesting. Very briefly, because I've gone on too long, I think. If you have questions, please do put them in the chat. I'll be happy to try and respond to them. But this is the theory of change. Now, it's a GCF theory of change. Anyone who's ever heard me before will know that I really don't like the GCF theory of change. It's not helpful. For example, here's activity 1.1.1, 1.1.2, and 1.1.3. What is not clear is that these logically connect from one to another. But overall, commendations to the 1Acre Fund for a theory of change that looks pretty good, because there are not arrows all over the place. And there is a very nice, clear logic to this. This is component 1, of course. Component 1, the outcome is increased household farmer income of climate vulnerable smallholders. So it's an improvement in income. And the improvement in farm productivity. These all come from this one fund. So you can see here the input, the various outputs. One is availability of inputs. It's basically through this revolving fund mechanism, but One Acre Fund purchases the equipment and delivers it. This second part, the enhanced ability of the farmers to access financial service providers. Fascinating that the One Acre Fund have had discussions with the microfinance institutions who are willing to accept this as a proof of reliability. At least they say they're willing to accept it, and I'm not disbelieving it, but it's interesting that this certificate carries so much weight once a farmer has been through the process. Interesting to see that emerging. And then outcome 2, outcome 3, I haven't really looked at. One is this output is all about training. So this is just training. You can see here they're going to refine the training materials, and they are going to deliver the training on support for crops and soil and health practices. This is where the information gets to the farmers. And again, I'd love to see a theory of change which allows us to see how these are combined and need and support one another, because in fact you don't just enroll and then provide inputs, but you provide training in how to farm in a more sustainable way, in a more resilient way, so that you are more diversified and the risks are reduced and such like. So that's that aspect of it. And then the third component of this is reduced greenhouse gas emissions because of the afforestation products that they will do. Firstly, cultivation and delivery of agroforestry seedlings to farmers that you can see here, and training on forestry. So interesting theory of change there. Well, okay. I hope you've got a good insight into that. Let's just have a look. It's fantastic to see all of you introduce you there. Hello, Paula. Hello, Salome, joining from Kenya. Great to see you here. Good morning, Shalene from Jamaica. My apologies if I pronounced your name wrongly there. Sapphire, welcome from Nairobi. Good to speak to you earlier today. And Anita from C40 Cities, fantastic that you can join us. Ronald, welcome. Joining from Guyana, from GGI. It's great to see you all here. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anything you would like me specifically to address? We've got just a few minutes left. I'm very happy to dig into anything that you might like me to talk about in more detail. So do let me know. Even after this is finished, if you put questions, comments, thoughts into the comments section on YouTube or on LinkedIn, I'll get to them. I'll give you some responses that are there. Really hope this has been useful. One of the things that happened at the board meeting was that, in fact, one of the board members raised the issue of how One Acre Fund, what One Acre Fund's commitments are and will be in order to ensure various things get delivered. And I thought, pending lack of questions, I would just tell you how that got addressed, because the board member met with the applicant, they discussed it, and they came up with 5 bullet points that went into the agreement and before the project was approved. So in fact, it was not approved straight away, but they had this discussion.
So Henry, would you be able to
it's
walk
informative
colleagues through,
to see. So let's look at that
through
quickly.
the proposal?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the board members who engaged with our teams and the AE to bring this. As represented in the discussion before, there were certain elements of an ITAP recommendation that board members felt that it would be good to actually bring it as a condition to be included in the FAA. The FAA is the agreement. Let us remember this is a PSAA, so there is no AMA. So there are elements of the AMA that are brought to the FAA. So the idea is to bring these conditions. The condition is to add these covenants to the FAA. And the first one is in regards to engaging the government in the project steering committee. This is to provide a little bit of that longevity as the project ends, given that the activities and the implementation of the project ceases when the project is fully closed, but the representation of the ministry shall provide some long-term engagement. It also says that in number B or item B that the ministry will be entitled to use the amounts to continue supporting the general objectives and purposes of the funded activity. This is because of the revolving fund approach. Then that to ensure that the repayments for the farmers are on a cost recovery basis. This is a way of passing on the concessionality that is being presented, taking into account costs incurred by the AE, and to ensure to the greatest extent possible that agriculture inputs of the project are provided from the various agroecological zones and locally sourced items. This is, if it is possible, to also engage in elements of local sourcing. The AE is comfortable that these are indeed covenants that are implementable, and therefore they are here for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, so I thought that would be a useful little addition to see how the certain covenants, certain recommendations from ITAP were actually brought into the financing agreement with the accredited entity to build that in to it. To my view, well, most of those were in the proposal already, so it doesn't do something absolutely unique. Anita, great. You've asked a question. How would you measure success or demonstrate the output using the example of the farmers? Apologies if I missed this section. I only saw the call when it had started. I understand that. This is your question. How would you measure the success or demonstrate the output? Well, essentially it has to come down to this theory of change. So if we dig back into that and look at it, there are certain outputs, and we would measure that those outputs have been delivered, which should roll up to the outcomes. Yeah. So this is perhaps I'm not saying anything groundbreaking or even answering specifically your question. How you measure success. One of the elements was around the change in farmers' assets. If you think about how to improve resilience of farmers, assets and availability of assets is one indicator of resilience, or on the other hand, an issue of vulnerability for farmers that are living on less than $2.50 a day, so living in acute poverty. How do you measure that sort of change? So this is one of those elements. There are lots, there's a whole logical framework for this project, which has lots of measurements along the way, the number of trees that are planted, the number of hectares that are covered here in this part of the project, the adoption of agroforestry. The trees have to last for 2 years before they get counted as actually having been successfully started, I suppose, to grow. So that's one of the elements to this. So yeah, PNG. Well, I know there's some wonderful people from CFAN. They're probably not in this call here because of the location of the Pacific, but and the time zone. I mean, but you know, that question of access, you know, in terms of who can put forward projects. It wouldn't only be SPREP and UNEP, of course, because you could have many different SPC, for example. And the folk from CFAN, many of whom are on the call, but from the Caribbean side of things, from CFAN, I know are very actively working in PNG on a number of projects, perhaps also CFAN projects, GCF projects, I mean. All right, well, thank you very much. Let me put on my closing QR code as well. I would love to get feedback on this event. Did it meet your expectations? It's just about 1 minute quick form that you can do on your phone. I'd love to hear your feedback. Was it the right length? Was it the right depth? Did I cover the things that you wanted to hear? Did the technology work and such like? I'd be thrilled. And I hope to do these sessions every 2 weeks at least. Perhaps we'll get down to a one per week, but have an interview session on the weeks in between. It's gradually evolving like that. Thank you very much for joining today. And hope to see you on LinkedIn, see you on YouTube and other places. Very happy to interact with you and chat with people. Thank you.